All right, we are live.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate.
Okay, let's shut that off. And then I will go ahead and share my screen.
Okay.
Just to get the countdown clock timer ready, and we'll begin that in about 1 minute. Okay. So for those who are joining and listening to us, if you want to chat in and let us know where you're joining from, and also if you have any questions for Daz, we'll get started in just about 10 minutes. Here we go.
Okay.
People are pressing hearts and sending us hearts and love.
Oh, that's great.
That's nice.
Good. I'm just trying to double check to make sure that the video is actually public.
Yeah, I refreshed another computer and I can see us going on that other computer.
Okay.
And yes, Pablo is confirming we're live as well.
Well, we can be live sometime once in the past, just once. We went live, but without going public.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Now I know what you're talking about, Jeff.
Yeah. I'm just trying to double check. We are public.
We are public. I just checked it. Yep, yep.
Okay. I wanted to double check that.
Good point. Yes, that has happened.
I've been very careful since then to always make sure that they're labeled public, but I'm also just in the habit of double checking most.
It's smart to triple check. Yeah,
So
everything looks good.
I see Pablo is scraping questions. Is Pablo all by himself?
It looks like at the moment, and I can assist if needed.
All right.
At the moment. Thank you, Pablo, for being here. He's one of our volunteers helping.
Well, if you'll excuse me for a minute, I'm going to just refresh my teacup.
Yeah, awesome.
I will be right back.
So Daz, it looks much lighter in your space than our last interview. It's staying lighter later. Isn't that nice?
It is nice. It's nice to be heading into summer. I mean, we've had it nice today. It's unusually mild this time of year, in April. It's usually raining. But today I spent all day in the sun in the garden, so that was awesome.
Oh, how wonderful. What kind of garden or what do you like to grow?
It's just plants in there. It's a little bit like a Zen garden, really. I have 3 decked areas. One with like a sofa seating area, and I have to be honest. After I did a little bit of weeding, I led out on that most of the day, reading books and stuff.
That's so smart. So do you grow any flowers or vegetables or mostly just kind
No
of
vegetables. It's all flowers. With an emphasis on Japanese maples. I have about 7 or 8 of those of different sizes and colors. Yeah.
Oh, how beautiful. We have an organic, I would say urban flower and vegetable garden, but I like that idea that if I ever feel like I just want a break, or maybe
Yeah.
let the crops, or if you will, kind of rest for a year, it could be very zen. I like that idea.
Yeah, mine's a very zen garden, and it's got a what we call a barrel pool with some fish in it and stuff, and that's underneath a waterfall, a little waterfall area, and I have lots of as I said Japanese maples with Buddhist statues, that kind of stuff. So
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
very relaxing. It's my zen zone.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
We have a couple bird baths, but I've always wanted to put in a water feature.
Yeah, I do like the little waterfall I've got, and again the barrel pond it's not really a barrel, it's just a huge big plastic 4 foot high vase type thing that I've
Mm.
filled up, and I've had a couple of fish in it for a few years with plants and lilies and all that kind of stuff.
Can the fish overwinter, or do you have to bring them indoors?
No, they're fine over winter. Because a goldfish, they kind of settle to the bottom. Well, they store up enough food and fat resources to last. Then they settle on the bottom of the water, because it's all frozen above them in winter, and they go into like a state of almost hibernation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful.
it is. Yeah, there's nothing nicer than spending some time in the garden on a sunny day.
Mm.
We've also been enjoying your photos, Daz.
Oh,
Emmy and
thanks.
I have had a chance to look at the many photos you've posted on your photography website.
Yeah, they're doing well. I'm just about to approach 13 million views of those. So
Oh my
yeah,
gosh,
very cool.
congratulations.
Yeah, they do very well. And I've last year I just published my second book. It's called and it's a quote taken from the film Star Wars called "You Rebel Scum."
Hmm.
Um, and it's essentially 10 years of me going to every major demonstration here in the UK and photographing people at demonstrations. The rebellious type of people.
Oh my gosh, you have something in common with Deborah Lynn Katz's sister, who
Yeah,
goes and does that as well. You know that about
I
her.
do know that. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
And yeah, I've got some amazing catchers, from anti-Trump demos to leave Brexit, stay in Brexit, climate change, the naked bike riders. They're always
That's
fun
the
to
one
see.
we enjoyed.
Yeah, yeah. They're a strange bunch of people. They're Emmy. If you don't know, they like campaign for cleaner streets.
Hmm.
Um, and we have several hundred people totally naked. I mean, they can wear underwear if they want to, but generally most of them are totally naked. Several hundred of them riding bikes around the streets of the major cities of the UK.
I hope they put something on their seats when they're doing that.
They do. They have like cleanliness kind of saddles and stuff like that. Yeah. But what amazes me is they do it. When it rain or shine, and I've seen them doing that when it's we've had thunderstorms.
Yeah, I don't know if you could get away with that here in the United States. You'd have to
No,
like have some special permission to do that. It sounds very freeing to do that.
I haven't done it myself. I've just gone along as the photographer. Uh, it's interesting. It's interesting seeing the different types of people, and yeah, it's not something you see very often. You see, is it? Naked people, walking around the streets and stuff.
No, I think I was I still have my massage and bodywork certification, but I've given massages to I don't know, 15, 20,000 of them probably naked
Mhm.
bodies. I mean, yeah, they're draped, but I'm like, hey, if people want to do that, why
Yeah,
not?
yeah. It always attracts a good crowd and lots of people cheering and all the cars honking their horns as they pass.
Yeah, but
Yeah, normally when you see pictures of naked people, they're young and attractive, but
Yes, yeah,
these are middle-aged people is very interesting.
yes, yeah, and they're great to talk to as well. I spend a lot of time in my photography talking to people like that, but also getting to know the different kind of people on the streets as well. I have spoken and spent time with a lot of homeless people, So I get to know their stories and why they're on the streets, and I try to yeah, record them, in a way that's not degrading them at all, but showing them as human beings.
Hmm.
Yeah, having been a nursing assistant and worked as an occupational therapist, I've also seen a lot of people without their clothing on in that regard as well. And in
Yeah,
a lot of cases, people's bodies are very smooth and still very beautiful under their clothes because they didn't get a lot of exposure to
yeah,
to sun. But anyway, we also have a different views of what quote attractiveness is and beauty. So, but it's nice that
yes,
people, it probably changed some of that if people didn't feel like they had to cover themselves up so much.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. Body positivity. That's a good one with the naked bike riders. Yeah,
Yeah. There's a beach here in Minneapolis that's a nude beach, but you have to know where it is. It's
yeah,
not public.
yeah. As I said, they do this every major city of the UK, Bristol, Cardiff, London, all over.
Oh, good for
Yeah.
them. We're ready, Jeff.
Okay, hello everybody and welcome. We are live. I am Jeffrey Mishlove. I'm here with my co-host Emmy Vadnais,
Hello, everybody. Welcome.
and our special guest today is Daz Smith, who is the editor and publisher of Eight Martinis, the state of the art of remote viewing magazine. Daz is also the author of several books, including Surfing the Psychic Internet, CRV, Controlled Remote Viewing, Remote Viewing Dialogues, and Remote Viewing 911. Welcome, Daz.
Hi guys, it's great to be here and be speaking with you again.
It's a pleasure, of course, for us to be with you. And we should let our viewers know you're struggling with a cold right now, so your voice is probably a little bit weaker than it might otherwise be. But we're delighted to have you with us. And if you have the energy to make an opening statement around our theme today, which is the outer limits of remote viewing, go for it.
Yeah, okay. As you said, I'm Daz Smith. I'm a remote viewing enthusiast who's been exploring this mind-bending field pretty much my entire life, with an emphasis on, I would say, remote viewing for the last 30 plus years now. And you can think of me as a part researcher, part mentor, and part creative guide to the world of kind of psychic intelligence, really. I'll skip the bit a bit about me publishing the magazine. The magazine's great for anyone that wants to learn all the kind of stuff about remote viewing, though, and it's free to download. So please have a look at that if you want to. Eight Martinis. And that also has a lot of stuff from the CIA Stargate archives in it. And I've read all 110,000 pages of information on that as well. And for those who know me, they might have seen my live remote viewing online or my live whiteboard sessions. And that's where I stand up, I grab marker pens, and I kind of map out targets in real time, pretty much like a psychic detective. And over the years, I've worked on over 200 missing person cases. I've done some really wild projects predicting global events, looking at UAPs, the afterlife, and way more targets than that, really. That's it, pretty much for an outlook of who I am and what I do.
It's fantastic.
We have a question here. This is a very interesting question from a viewer whose YouTube name, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, is Brano or Brano, who asks, have you ever tried to remote view artificial intelligence?
A great question.
That is a great question. Not yet. That's not been given to me as a blind target yet. I did, as a project manager, task some of my people that work for me, just as a fun project, to look at one of the large language models, and that was not long after a Google engineer came out and said that he felt the large language model he was using at Google was sentient, with some interesting responses. Half the remote viewers picked up that there was a sentience, and half the remote viewers didn't at that stage. But that was probably going on about 12, 16 months ago. I think things may have changed now if we relook at it, to be honest.
Fascinating.
Daz, I know you did this in our interview. We recently released an interview, remote viewing UFOs and UAP. And if you could just briefly touch on what remote viewing is, because I imagine there's people who are enthusiasts like yourself who are joining, and some are maybe curious or maybe don't understand what's the difference between that and maybe working as a psychic medium or some other telepathic or intuitive skill or method.
Absolutely. Well, remote. Let me find a simple way of saying this. Remote viewing is a fascinating skill that lets you use your mind and body to feel and see information about a place, person, event that's far away from us and hidden. It's kind of like having a subconscious drone scouting out the unknown for you as a person. It's not about guessing or imagining. It's a structured process that kind of trains you to tap into information beyond your normal senses. And you can kind of think of it as a skill anyone can develop with practice, where your brain tunes into very subtle signals, and then we describe these things that we can't usually physically see or feel.
Hmm. Thank you for that. And one of the reasons we titled Exploring the Outer Limits, this live stream, Exploring the Outer Limits of Remote Viewing today, is because of that interview that we did recently, because part of the tenets of remote viewing is that there needs to be feedback on the target. So the remote viewer is tasked by a project manager, is that what? Yeah.
That's correct, yeah.
And the remote viewer doesn't know what the topic is, doesn't know the target. They're often you're just given like a number or something like that. But the project manager knows what it is. And so after you get your information, then you are given feedback on it. And we, in that last interview, looked at Roswell, we looked at the Phoenix Lights, we looked at a lot of different historical UFO UAP events. And the reason that we discussed those was because there was some feedback from those. And I'm just curious because this is the title of our live stream today. What is the outer limit of remote viewing, do you think?
Oh, that's a hard one. Um, that's hard to answer because, and two cases come to mind. Um, One case, I was tasked a year and probably about 2 years ago, blindly, to try to work out why remote viewers can't win the lottery. Because, myself and there are plenty of other amazing remote viewers through history. You've had them on your channel. Joe McMoneagle, Ingo Swan, many of them. No one has been able to win the hundreds of millions on the lottery using remote viewing, and we kind of know there must be a reason why. So I was tasked that again, but it was blind, so I didn't know that's what I was looking at. And in the RVs session, or I describe and I sketch a process of psychic information coming into the human mind. And then what I did as part of the process is I followed that back to try to work out where the psychic information came from. And it led me back to a deep, dark space in the universe there that was super dense, super compacted, super cold. And within that void, almost I guess like a black hole or something, um, there was an all-being, all-seeing, sentient type life form. I'm not religious, but if I was religious, I would have to call it a god type thing. But I sensed this amazing
Hmm.
life form that was sending information to us. And I didn't come up with the answer of why we couldn't win the lottery of that. All I know is that if we're looking for the deepest, darkest places where this could go, that was one of the places that blew me away. And more recently, and I can show you, if you want to see this, I can show you the actual RV session because I have it on my desktop here. I was tasked several weeks, 6 weeks ago, to look at the one of the New Jersey drone events. And as I was looking at this and describing this organic shape shifting craft, in my RV session and sketching it and talking about how it had uh, this interactive consciousness in the craft that, as a form of camouflage, it scanned the local vicinity below it, and dependent on what the most dominant interacting subconscious was, that's it showed its form that life form expected to see. So it actually camouflaged itself, to what that life form wanted to see. So if they were expecting to see a drone, that's what it would show them. If they were expecting to see a plane, it would show them that, and so on. Um, and part of the process during the RV session, I tried to follow that, one of the controlling forces for that drone, because it was like a remotely operated vehicle, in that there was a driver, but the driver was somewhere else, located somewhere else. So I tried to follow that location back to where that driver was, and that happened to be weirdly through some kind of weird dimensional portal, made up of onion-like layers. And at the end of it was a weird sight of a vertical hive-like city, hundreds of miles high. But where we would have our cities on, we lay our cities out on a horizontal kind of plateau. This was vertical in layers, very much like a hive full of millions of different life forms living in this, almost like this city floating in space. But yeah, as I said, it was hundreds of miles tall. So that's another extreme. I can't feed back that, of course, any of those, but they're the extreme edges of where I've gone with this, I would say.
Mm. Yeah, and we're going to have you as a guest again on New Thinking Aloud for a recorded interview about what you remote viewed with the drones in the near future as well.
Yeah.
Well, it raises the question, when you're doing remote viewing of an unknown target and there's no possibility of getting any feedback, what are the criteria that you used as to determine how much confidence you would have in that viewing?
Yeah, that's a good question. The majority of it for me, to start really with this, we do try to, and I do express to anyone that's setting me a target that they should really only set me targets that have an element of feedback. In the case of the New Jersey drone, we knew the events were happening, and I was focused to look upon a piece of film footage that was on tape. So we had the film footage on tape, so we know that there is some kind of physical something captured on tape there. So there is a small part of element there, of feedback. I would say probably not enough, but there is a little bit. I do try to stress to anyone that does set me a target that we should only work if we're going to go for mysteries type targets, we should only go on for the ones that do have a multiple sources of credible information. For example, the Tic Tac UFO, the one that happened over the Nimitz, that would be a perfect case to look at with remote viewing, because we have witness testimony, we have radar readings, and we have video film. So we have some solid sources of feedback. So I would say that would be a good one. A bad one would literally just be a picture of, a single light in a black sky with nothing else to follow up. So I do try to make people give me targets with good feedback. And when we don't have good feedback, the only thing we can fall back on until we do get feedback is my 30 plus years of doing remote viewing, and a generally very good accuracy on pretty much every target that I'm tasked against. That's
Right.
the and I give caveats as well. If we don't have enough feedback, I tell everyone you have to be very careful with the information I've just given you, and you should only really assess it with other forms of information, never on its own, and be very wary of it until we do get solid feedback.
And you did view the Tic Tac, the US
Hmm.
Nimitz,
I
and
did, yes.
you're right. And we can extrapolate your accuracy rate, which I think is 80 plus percent.
Yes, yes. Bear in mind, I'm also working for a company called the Future Forecasting Group, and for 9 years now, we've been putting out monthly predictions and forecast every single week of the year on, markets like the S&P 500, gold, Bitcoin, and all those markets as well, with great accuracy.
Right. And then you did tell me too that which I see there's somebody has a question. There's, I think, a couple questions coming in about future remote viewing, is that maybe on par with winning the lottery, you also talked about how the accuracy for remote viewing the future, if I recall correctly, was around 60% for you
Yeah, yeah.
because of all the
Mine's
different
about
variables
60,
involved.
mine hovers between 60 and 65.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And can you let us know again why you feel that that is around that accuracy rate?
Yeah, it's not just me. It seems to be pretty much most people looking at future target events, especially when they're playing things like ARV or associative remote viewing, where we have two targets, for like binary outcomes on, whether like a team will win a game, yes or no, and we try to look at the future to see what we're going to get as feedback in the future. Um, I think the accuracy goes down because the event we're generally looking at just hasn't coalesced into a single event yet. There are lots of things in play. I think it's worse on sports events, something like the winner of the Super Bowl, because you may have several, probably billion people that are looking at that worldwide who have they're invested in the outcome of that game for one reason or another. They may have put money on it, or they may just love the team that they're invested in. So you can imagine all those intents. All of us here, in the show, we know that human consciousness can affect things. Prayer, thoughts, or healing, remote influencing, all that kind of stuff. So you can imagine the conflict of several billion people all wanting, half of them wanting the team to do this and half of them wanting them to do that, all as an interplay. And then there's you as a little psychic that's trying to, coalesce that into a single piece of data.
Yeah, and what have you and your colleagues found as far as the winning the lottery piece about what's happening there? Because I think you mentioned that there was a case where somebody got, was it like five of the six numbers correct or something like that? Or
Yeah, I've actually done that myself several times, and and I've said this to some people as well. My belief over the last 5 years of looking at RV is that I have a feeling that there is something within the RV process that's actually sentient and alive. I can't prove this; it's just my feeling, uh, because it does seem to morph and adapt with us as we develop as subconscious beings. And at times it does like to play with us. Like when I spent several months trying to get lottery numbers, I would, and I was trying to get seven double-digit numbers. I would get very close. I would get five numbers. I would probably get three that were correct, and then two that were one digit away. And that would happen repeatedly as well. It'd be like one digit away constantly, and it literally is. And at the time with RV, when you think you've nailed it, you've got something down pat, and you know what you're doing. The very next time you do it, it gets turned on its head, and it's almost like you have this little creature on your shoulder that's just laughing at you. Which is why I think that the trickster effect is in full force within remote viewing, and I really do believe that there is some sentience behind what we're doing with all this.
Hmm.
Well, the idea that the remote viewing process itself is sentient makes sense if you consider the whole universe to be sentient, which I do. Uh, One of the people who I think has some knowledge in this area, who I've talked to, is Gary Zukav, the author of The Seed of the Soul. And many years ago, when ARV was first becoming popular, I talked to him about it uh, because at the time, some big investment firm, Battery March, I think was the name of it, an $11 billion investment company. The head of the company gave an interview and they said, "What's your secret?" And he said, "Oh, I've been reading The Dancing Woolly Masters by Gary Zukov."
Yeah,
So I
great book.
reached out to Gary and he said, "Well, if you're going to use this ability for financial gain, the results that you get are going to be dependent on your karma."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think we discussed this previously, and I discuss it with people out there. Because I get asked a lot every time a skeptic comes on to challenge me on X Spaces or anything. It's like, oh, why aren't you a millionaire by now, winning the lottery? And I tried to explain to them that I also believe that there is another force in play as well. And I'm just totally honest with people, and I know that if I did win the 100 million on the lottery, I would never remote view again. I would literally buy an island. I'd be sat on the island drinking vodka till I expired, kind of thing. And I just know that that's not my life path. You know, when I was 15, when I first started on the psychic journey, uh, I was trained in clairvoyance and mediumship and all the classical techniques. And as part of that process, we were encouraged to keep a journal or psychic diary, and I still have mine. I have all mine. And the very first thing I wrote in my very first psychic diary at 15 years old was, "One day I will find a way to travel through time and the universe using my mind." And then, 7, 8 years later, I found remote viewing, and I've been, doing it ever since. So I do know, and I'm lucky enough to know what my goal here on Earth is to do. It is to do this remote viewing, and that, yeah, as part of your thread here, I know that if I'm an honest person, I know that if I won 100 million on the lottery, I would, it would dissuade me from doing this, and it's just not part of my life goal. So it's probably not going to be there for win that 100 million. It's not part
Well,
of my
that
karma,
sounds,
my life go, my destiny.
it's very crucial to be aware of your purpose in life and to try and stay on purpose. It may be that your purpose is to accumulate a lot of money.
I don't think so. It would have happened. But saying that, using remote viewing and intuition, working with a future forecasting group this last 9 years, and I was never a financial person before I started with joining it with them. But learning about how finances work and use intuition, I've managed to be the wealthiest I've ever been based on, using intuition to bet on, not bet, but invest on Bitcoin. And
Mhm.
it's worked for me.
That's good to know. Here's a question from a viewer named Andrei Slavash Krasowski, one of our regular viewers. I think Andrei has posted a question in almost every single live stream we've done.
And
So,
very good questions too.
yeah, special acknowledgement to Andrei Slavash Krasowski, who, and this is a good question. He says, what about the use of remote viewing in mathematics or in logic to solve some of the really difficult problems and to get intuition regarding the solution to unsolved problems in science and logic? Do you know of that, or have you engaged in anything like that?
Not yet, but I would love to see people doing that. I think remote viewing has the capability to be used in so many experimental circles. It's just that because esoteric kind of practices have been a bit sidelined in the past, the funding just isn't there to get a team of 8 to 10 people to work on projects like that for several months to a year. I did do a project working for Deborah Lynn Katz several years ago, where we were, as remote viewers, we were blindly tasked to look at and describe the uses of a bacteriophage, which is, a part of biology. And the data that we brought back, which was shared with scientists as part of the process, absolutely stunned the scientists. They said they couldn't believe that the sketches were so exact. So we could use remote viewing in these circles if the funding were there to do it. It's just, there aren't that many operational remote viewers in the world doing this kind of work. I probably know about, I would say at the maximum 30 in the entire world doing this that we know that aren't in, secret circles.
Right. I was just going to say there might be those who are keep a low profile who are maybe working with some of these
Allegedly so. Yes.
different groups or larger companies or those who have the resources to hire them.
Yeah.
Here's a question from Matthias Wolkenstein. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. They ask, or they say, thanks for the show, guys. Is it possible to remote view your past or future self or even your higher self?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And a lot of my colleagues are doing that all the time. A colleague I worked with for several years, who we organise meetings with in the UK here, where we all met up, Rick Hilliard. He he had a process where he tried to RV his what's the word? I can't remember the exact wording of it, but his best partner, or the wording for best partner, and he used the information from that to then find himself a wife, and that worked for him. And I know others that do the same. I personally haven't. I've never used RV for anything personal. Um, I for me, that would just be boring. It would be a bad use of an amazing tool. There's so many amazing things for us to go to look at, like the previous question. Solving equations, mathematics, science, looking at the far reaches of the universe. That's where I feel the good uses of RV is not me looking to see what I'm going to be like in 10 years' time. That just doesn't appeal to me personally.
Well, I'm all for you enhancing your life however you want, but I love how you're wanting to help humanity and all of us. Yeah.
Here's a question from a viewer named Jason Hahn, who would like to know. I think Jason is identifying himself as a novice viewer. I think so. And he says, how would you describe the visceral changes? I think he means bodily sensations of your remote viewing skill set from being a novice to where you are today.
Hmm.
Wow, yeah, that's a great question. How to answer this really? I pretty much teach my own method now, which I call flow, and it's essentially it was built on what we call classic CRV, but I've kind of like supercharged this with kind of lessons I've learned from my operational work, and my approach is that remote viewing as well is based on CRV, and what Ingo developed is very artistic in its nature. It's an artistic kind of partnership between the method itself, which, as I said, I think is sentient and alive, and the remote viewer. I think we're working in a symbiotic relationship, the viewer and the method. And what happens in the RV process is that you have to start to trust the information and the feelings that flow through you. And with remote viewing, it's not like what it sounds. Most of what we get as remote viewers isn't viewed or visual information. The majority of it is feelings. And for me personally, the feelings are from this area here, the heart kind of chest chakra area. Um, so when I'm talking about the target, the target's blue, the target feels metallic, it feels slick, curved if I rub my hand across it. I'm not seeing that visually. I'm feeling that with my body and all my soul. And the key thing to learn as a novice to advanced remote viewer is learning to trust every one of those very subtle feelings as they come in, to write them down and not to censor or omit it. And where you get to the point where you can throw the ego aside and literally just trust every single feeling you get, that's when it all makes total sense to you as a psychic or an intuitive.
That's great. I love the word trust, Daz.
It's all about trust. For me, it was just a weird moment. I think I was about 6 years into my RV training. Things were going okay, and then one day it was just like I don't care anymore if I because with remote viewing we always want well, with everything in life we always want to be accurate. We always want to please. As a remote viewer, we're like a performer, a dancer, or a sportsman. We have to put on a performance and give data across for someone then to go, well done, a pat on the back, or I'm very sorry you missed the target. So it's all about pleasing other people. And one day, like a light switch for me, it was just like I don't care anymore about pleasing the people or pleasing myself or getting it accurate. And the moment the light switch went on, I really did not care anymore about getting accurate data, but just enjoying the process and trusting the data. That's for me when my ability and everything just went almost like straight up with the data, the accuracy, and yeah, and just the general feeling of how this works within you. And it's different for all of us. Where we're all individuals with this. It's going to be slightly different for every person out there that tries this.
Did you find that when you allowed yourself to trust more and care less about the outcome? I mean, you just said that your data increased, but did you find that you were able to just receive more information
Yeah,
or yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was like, and I guess it's harder for us all to do. It's like really totally moving the ego aside, so the ego's not there, it doesn't matter anymore. And, I do so many targets for so many people now. I don't know what I'm doing from day to day. I don't care if I don't care if I get feedback for it. It's just like, it is like a job, so I'm just doing one after another. But at the same time, I do trust everything that I write down. And, as remote viewers, we'll be writing words down that I don't even know. For example, the drone target that we were discussing, I was discussing that with Nick Cook, who wrote the Hunt for a Zero Point the other day, and he was very interested because we were discussing that target, and I was telling him that I wrote down that the drones were made of organic plasma, but I said to him, I don't even, I'm not that intelligent. I don't even know what plasma is, but plasma keeps coming up when I do UAP RV sessions. It comes up time after time again, but I couldn't tell you as a person what plasma is. But he was very interested by that. And again, it's trusting, whatever the data is, you don't admit it, you don't let your ego get in the way, you just record it and then move on. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Here's a question from Margie Huron, who says, I think super young kids don't have the vocabulary to do structured remote viewing, but teens could with an experienced ethical instructor or mentor. And she wonders what you think about children engaging in remote viewing.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I haven't given that much thought, to be honest. I mean, it would be an amazing. I mean, I would probably change the way I taught it a little bit if you wanted to approach it with children. But my approach anyway is very, as I said, it's called flow. It's very flowing, because I was brought up on the beliefs and the philosophy of Bruce Lee. His Jeet Kune Do, which was like everyone should be like water. Everything should flow. The information should flow for you, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that if you taught children in that same way, you taught them to meditate, to allow the creativity, because that's all my approach is. The CRV approach to remote viewing that Ingo Swan came up with, and me and him had a discussion about this. It's just art. You start off with doodles, you advance later on to sketches, and then after that you go to more advanced sketches, or you model the target. So you're creating sculpture. So remote viewing is art and it's creative. So yes, if we were enhancing and using the creative abilities of the children and blossoming that, I think it would be an amazing tool.
We have a question from one of our volunteers, and Pablo, he's here today helping. Thank you again, Pablo. And he's asking, have you remote viewed future targets, which we know you have, you said earlier. Do you have any theories about them, as remote views can influence the outcome, such as like the multiverses, the black universe?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, the future. I've done many, and weirdly, we've done targets. I worked for 2 years for Courtney Brown on Farsight, where and this is where it gets complicated, so bear with me for a second. So we were given a target, and there was no target when we did it. So we were just given a number, it's target 15, but there was no set target. So we did the remote viewing, and then the target was actually chosen 2 months after we had submitted our remote viewing by someone randomly looking at the news 2 months in the future and then picking a target and matching it. So how all this works when we're doing stuff like that, I have no idea. It does flummox me on how all this comes together. I really don't know how it works. I also believe, and I can't prove this as well, that any project that I put public, and we all put lots of these projects public, but I see and I feel more intuitively that anyone then that goes on to look at that project may also be entangled in that project and may also have had an effect on us when we did that project in all the months or years before, or maybe there's ongoing continual kind of effect across time. I don't know, but there does seem to be some kind of very strange effects that could happen across time and space there.
Mhm. I think there's a question here, and I think this comes up often when people start exploring the far reaches of mind, consciousness, spirituality. People can become fearful or be concerned about what exactly one is interacting with. And this person, their name is someone on YouTube, says, "What do you mean by something sentient? Do you mean a demonic force?" And of course, they're putting their own
Yeah.
ideas on there. But I guess, so I think you probably know how to address that question.
Yeah. We don't see that kind of stuff, or I don't anyway, because I can only tell people about my experiences. I have never really experienced that kind of stuff using remote viewing. But before, in my classical, I say my classical training days, I did spend, and we discussed one of my books earlier. I had this book called Surfing the Psychic Internet, and that's essentially 10 years of me within a home development psychic circle group using classical techniques where we as individuals and as a group projected ourselves out into, I guess, the universe, and had dialogues and conversations with non-physical life forms, and that could be any, and it was any kind of life form. So it was what we would call nowadays non-humans. I think it was like deceased humans as well, but there was a vast smorgasbord of life out there that you can contact. And it's a bit like going into an internet chat room, or going into a Facebook group nowadays. Um, some of the life forms and the people you're going to meet are nice, and some of them are going to be trolling you, and it's the same when you do that kind of stuff. But I must stress that was a different format and a different way of using psychic abilities than remote viewing. Remote viewing is generally what we call passive, in that you're getting information, you're not interacting. The other psychic techniques, especially the more classical ones like channeling, they're what I call active. So there's like a two-way kind of thread going on there.
And if I can just squeeze this question in here, Jeff, this comes from another one of our really cool volunteers, Jeremiah Broadway, who I happen to have dinner with, a fabulous dinner with him and his fiance this Friday. He asks, "Have you ever encountered other intelligences while remote viewing, and how should one conduct themselves in the event this happens? Are there any particular protocols?"
Yeah, again, that's an interesting one. Yeah, it happens a lot. It happened, as I said, we were discussing the recent drones one. Um, when I was investigating the New Jersey drones, I could feel the sentience in the organic kind of craft-like life form. And I could also, because we're remote viewers, so I could also pick up, um, and I detail the people that were in the vaster area below the event, and we're talking about the human population there. And I also picked up on the intent and the feelings of a small group of military trained people that were in the area, who were they were the ones actually calling the craft down at the time. So yeah, you just have to be careful and be ethical in everything you do. As a remote viewer and an intuitive, you don't want to harm anyone or anything. You don't want to have harmful intent. You don't want to hurt anything. You don't want to. You don't even want to influence anything in any way at all. You're trying to leave. It's like going to a national park. You try to leave it as clean as when you arrived, kind of situation. So just be respectful of everything that you can, but also, be careful, because the universe is a vast space, and there are lots of different life forms with different intents, and different agendas in the way that they interact with you.
I like how you say to keep it clean like a park. It's a great intention.
Here's a question from a viewer whose YouTube name is Plant Watering Citizen, who asks, when you're viewing targets, have there been situations where you could sense the presence of other remote viewers converging on the same target?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's something we in the RV community debate a lot. I have never encountered any other remote viewer at any target. And I also have I have a couple of very large target pools online as well that remote viewers work. And occasionally they send me RV sessions as well. And I think I discussed earlier, I've been doing this 30 years, so I have seen tens of thousands of remote viewing sessions now, going all the way back for the Stargate people and people that I work with every single day. I have never once seen a remote viewing session from another remote viewer that shows other human remote viewers at a target.
Mhm, mhm.
Have you developed any ability at all to sense the presence of a remote viewer outside of targets you were looking at?
No, it's just never happened. But that might be me and my belief system because it's my belief system that I'm not actually going anywhere. Everyone might have a different belief system, you see, but my belief system is that the information about the entire universe is, it's within me, it's within this microphone, it's within you guys, and I'm just tapping into that. I'm just tapping into this entangled information about Mars or whatever the target is that's within me. So I'm not actually going. There's not a part of me that's going anywhere to be picked up by anyone or anything.
Well, I do recall, Daz, an earlier interview that you and I had when we talked about Ingo Swan's book, Penetration, and how Ingo was remote viewing the moon, as I recall, and he encountered other beings on the moon who sensed his presence
Yes,
and basically forced him to leave.
yes. I think all bets are off when it comes to non-humans because we were discussing human remote viewers. I've never ever sensed a human in anywhere anything that I've done. Um, it change as I said, it changes when we're talking about non-humans. Many times I've interacted and seen and felt the non-humans and interacted with them, and and again, their organic craft as well, because their craft is alive. It's not a machine like we think it is. Yeah.
And there is a question here from a viewer, Jonathan R., who asks, any viewing of the moon? Question mark. Inside? Question mark.
Yeah, that's another great question. I've got a great interest with the moon, and I've been sent there, but I've only been sent there myself personally. I think 3 times. Yes, because the rest of it's been Mars. Mostly people send me to Mars, but only 3 times to the moon. And coincidentally, though, I was sent 3 times to the moon to the exact same target by 3 different taskers, and it's like there's this famous photograph of what looks like a cigar-shaped object lying in a crater on the moon, and 3 different people have sent me to the exact same object. And I think the distance is like about 12 years apart between the 3 different targets. And interestingly, the more times I go back to it, the data gets a lot more better in its accuracy and sketching. The more I end up going back to it, so that's happened. What do I make of that? No, I don't know because I don't know if the photo is fake or there's not enough feedback to be determine what's there. It does seem to show some kind of man-made structure, um, and from what I've seen from other remote viewers, including Ingo Swan, amongst many others, there do seem to be some anomalous man-made structures on the surface of the moon, but I haven't seen anyone yet RV inside the moon at all.
Hmm.
That would be a good target. But again, the problem we have is feedback. Like any of the moon targets, it would be great to RV the dark side of the moon, and I have kind of slipped there accidentally in RV sessions and sketched uh, some kind of space type port type facility. But because we can't see the dark side of the moon and NASA don't release many pictures of that kind of stuff, there is very little to no feedback to confirm any of it.
I have a question from a viewer whose YouTube name is Fake Norwegian, who says, it seems like front-loading targets is becoming more popular. How do you feel about front-loading versus blind targets? When you are more advanced, is it easier to avoid AOLs, which is analytical overlay?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's always hotly debated this within remote viewing because, remote viewing is essentially just taking being psychic and then wrapping it in this kind of psychic kind of in this scientific kind of protocol to try to make what you do as scientific as possible. And by doing that, we try to be as blind as possible as well. But but then when you try to move into like operational use, and I think I've discussed that I use remote viewing to look at cryptocurrencies. When I'm tasked to look at a cryptocurrency, I do know up front that I'm looking at a cryptocurrency. So I'm trying to describe one as of today, it's one in 3.6 million different ones. So although I feel, I am front loaded, so I know the avenue of information that I'm looking at, I feel that because there are 3.6 million of them, if I can nail the logo, the target, the CEO, the look of the cryptocurrency, I feel that the foreknowledge of knowing it's a crypto in that case doesn't hurt me getting valid data on it. So I think for operational use, it has its uses. Like for example, if when I was looking for missing people for the police, I knew I was looking for a missing person. And then what that allowed me to do was because I knew I was looking for a missing person, um, it allowed me to change my skills and hone my skills on sketching the target and describing the target and eventually giving the police a GPS coordinate based on my sketches. I wouldn't know to do that if they just give me a target and said it was totally blind. And me knowing it was a missing person told me nothing actually about the location of where that missing person was. It doesn't, knowing looking for a missing person tells me nothing whatsoever about the location. So being front loaded does not damage the RV in any way. It just allows the remote viewer to really hone their intent and their particular set of skills or tools to get better information.
Daz, can you share a little bit about how your process flow is different with remote viewing than other types of remote viewing?
Yeah, it's essentially CRV or classic CRV, which is the method Ingo Swann came up with in, from 79 to 86 that he taught the US military. Um, but my approach is slightly different in that the people I teach aren't soldiers. Like Ingo taught soldiers and people that were trained in intelligence. And the people I meet on the day-to-day street, they aren't that way inclined. So the harshness of the way Ingo taught them, with the very harsh structure and lectures and writing your notes out over and over again, that doesn't work with today's people. So mine has a different philosophy around it, but also my approach is a bit more creative based as well, because I am a graphic designer and an artist. So I really try to encourage people to use their creativity as part of the remote viewing process, and really get those sketches going and to really hone in on the sketches and tease as much information out of those as possible. So it's essentially I've just kind of jazzed it up a little bit. Um, and it's mainly the philosophy, I have a true philosophy of that every student that I teach is different. So I have to adapt the method that I'm teaching, the flow method for each individual as well. We play upon their strengths and weaknesses. If they want to do something as slightly different than the traditional way of doing it, but it works for them, then we allow that change to manifest and take place. So yeah, it is CRV, the traditional way, but it's more adaptable, I would say, than that approach, more creative and more flowing.
It's helpful. Thank you.
A viewer named Brano, this is his second question. So, who asks, who creates us and the other beings in the whole universe? But his question, I think this is the real question here. Did you look into some enlightened beings and their journey?
Wow, that's a very good question. Not so much with remote viewing, because as I said earlier, I try to get the people tasking me targets to, task me as much targets that have feedback as possible. But I would say that, in my book, Surfing the Psychic Internet, which I did, which is essentially my psychic work before I found remote viewing, that has a lot more of me having conversations with non-human life forms that, angels, demons, all kinds of avatars, dark, and even some bad experiences. I had some shadow beings that followed me around there for a while because they didn't want to see human subconscious development. So that's the bad, that's the kind of darker side of things. Yeah, but that's not within RV. RV, as I said, it's a bit more passive. None of that kind of stuff happens very much. unless we're tasked to go for very specific esoteric targets, and then those type of things tend to manifest.
So you haven't looked at any great spiritual teachers from the past, for example.
With RV, I was only tasked a year ago to look at the first experiences from, I can't remember the guy's name, but he created Reiki.
Hmm.
And the tasking was to, uh, when he first encountered or had his Reiki kind of inspiration, to kind of work, to remote view him to find out what happened and where that remote viewing information came from. And I reported that it came from this from above downwards, this enlightened interaction with a super being type relationship, and that is all online as well. 5 remote viewers were at that, and all our data on that's on online in the Hellfire Club if people want to have a look at that.
It's I don't know if I probably won't pronounce his name correctly. Mikao Usu,
That sounds familiar.
Mikaousui.
Yes.
Yeah, it developed in Japan in the 1920s, apparently.
Yeah, I have some amazing, and in my RV session, as I said, it's online so people can see it. I have some amazing sketches of a life form being bathed from above in this very strange energy with this very energetic entangled particles in it, which was giving him divine inspiration. Um, yeah, so on that occasion, I would say that's probably that, and I was tasked against Jesus on the cross, quite a few years ago as well, and that was mind blowing as well. That when I looked at Jesus again, it was all blind, um, but the feelings I had from that life form that people know as Jesus, there was such love like I've never experienced in RV or out of RV before on looking at that one.
Hmm.
And that I presume was also a blind target.
That was a blind target. Yes, yes.
Anything else you want to say about remote viewing Jesus? Because I know there are a lot of people who are fans of Jesus, and then there
Yeah,
are some who
I've
that's not
just
their
finished.
cup of tea, or they have other feelings.
I've
But
just finished a project for a future forecasting group because I task a special group in there called the Rabbit Hole Remote Viewers. They work at esoteric targets, and I tasked them to look at the creation event for the Shroud of Turin. So I wanted to know how that image got on the cloth, the exact moment that was created. So I sent 5 of my best remote viewers against. I was the project manager on this one. Um, and I have, my intent is, as I said, I'm not really religious. I know there's an image on the cloth, and you guys know that I'm a photographer, so I'm intrigued how that photographic image got there, knowing photography. That's my only personal bias on this. I sent 5 remote viewers against it, and we just published the information Friday. It would be public for anyone to watch within a month, but for our subscribers, it was published Friday. All 5 remote viewers came back with a process of creation where, again, energy from above and from inside of a life form uh, exploded out. A white glowing blue energy exploded outwards from the being and from above the being, and they actually said the words made an imprint. And 4 of the remote viewers, actually 3/4 the way through the remote viewing, had the kind of AOL feeling that they were looking at Jesus Christ when they were doing it. But all 5 remote viewers had the most amazing, I would say, their own personal transcendental experience from seeing that creation process. And they all described the exact same thing. There was nothing about machinery creating a photographic process, other people in the vicinity. It was literally just what we've been told happened in the stories.
and I just want to emphasize that what always blows my mind in remote viewing is that unless there's a little bit of front loading like you described earlier, you're completely blind and you sent your 5 of your best remote viewers. They could be remote viewing a million other things, but they all focus in on the same topic and then get
Yeah.
similar information.
The overlap on that one is pretty stunning, and I feel that this one's a good one because we do have the shroud. So we have something. It's been carbon dated. There are mixed results on the carbon dating, but there's carbon dating. We do have quite a lot of solid data on that. With the stories in the Bible and everything else to kind of back it up. So yeah, to see what the remote viewers came back with shocked me, but I think it shocked them as remote viewers that they were experiencing this high level, very energetic, esoteric transformation event. They all talk about how it's transformative. And yeah, the sketches that the guys came up with in the data was was shocking because, as I said, I'm not a religious person, but that was enough to make me think very much more about the stories we're told about in the Bible about the events that surround that cloth.
And did you get a satisfactory answer then for your inquiry about how the shroud was created?
Yeah, I think so. I think the data indicates that it came from some kind of interaction with the body, and that it wasn't a normal photographic chemical process that was, I don't know how they would have faked it, but faked in some way with maybe putting some kind of liquid on a fabric and then exposing it to, like we would do a normal photograph.
Mhm.
There was none of that in the RV session. It was all very esoterically transcendental. Yeah.
And working with what sounds like light.
Very much light from, as I said, from inside the body, but also there was an interaction from above that came downwards.
Hmm.
Very strong, very white, sparkly light. And yeah, they kind of picked up on other energy beings and lots of other stuff like that as well.
Hmm. Fascinating.
Here's a question from a Matthias Wolkenstein, who has had a previous question. And he asks if consciousness can target past or future events, which obviously we know has been done. Have you ever noticed a resolution drop the further you move from the present, similar to signal attenuation in radio astronomy?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Not for present and past targets. Um, they seem to be easy and set. But as we discussed, looking ahead, and it doesn't matter how far ahead, whether it's a few weeks or a few months, the accuracy still kind of hovers, usually about 60 plus percent, 65%. But we do get the odd occasion where it's massive, the accuracy is massively more than that. For example, a month before the recent Palestine situation that went on with the initial attacks. Um, uh, my viewers and me at Future Forecasting, we were targeted against looking at some kind of medical device in the future, but every single one of us did not look at that. Every single one of us, all were describing some kind of very soon future military attack, which was going to change everything globally. Um, and our taskers were like, well, what's going on? This is crazy. They're not looking at this medical device. So they reformatted the tasking, the wording behind it, and gave it back out to us. Again, all five of us completely missed the medical device target in the future and all described the very same, future-based attack. And we think this is because well, Dr. Ed May came out with this. He found that targets that have a lot of entropy seem to attract remote viewers. And some of these events in the future, like the one we're discussing, the Palestine kind of war situation that blew up, that obviously has a lot of global entropy, lots of change, lots of energy, and that targets with a lot of entropy, change, energy seem to be like a beacon of light in the darkness that attract remote viewers like a moth to a flame kind of thing. And that can be in the future or in the past. So there are some events like that, big, huge events that do break the mold on that, and we can get very accurate data on those events, but they are, I would say, they're the rarity, not the norm. Sorry for such a long answer on that one.
Oh
No,
no, you're doing great. You're doing great, Daz. And I know we're queuing up a lot of questions your way. So if we just want to take them give you a little pause for a moment and let our viewers know that we just have about 30 minutes left and everybody's asking wonderful questions on this live stream today. We typically avoid politics on New Thinking Aloud out of wanting to keep things neutral and a pleasant experience for everybody. At the same time, there's a lot of events happening in the world and a lot of challenges happening, war, people being unhoused and not having homes and all sorts of calamities happening. I'm curious, there's a question here from Derek Elliott who says, in terms of Putin and his current Russia, can you comment on what you have seen in the next 5 to 10 years forward? And just wondering if you have done any remote viewing about any world events or anything um, that you care to comment on, and if not, we can let that be.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Because ethically, I'm very against what we call doom mongering. Um, but there is this thread within uh, UAPs and remote viewing and that kind of stuff out there at the moment where people are talking about um, a lot of psychics or intuitives or remote viewers have encountered data that does indicate some kind of very near future catastrophic events. And I have to be honest, my group and myself have seen indicators of something that might be very close. But again, like with all remote viewing and remote viewing looking at the future, I'm only 60% accurate.
Yeah. So we have that on our sides. I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah. So yes, we do. And I have seen some stuff, but in line with what other people have seen as well, which does indicate some very not nice stuff. But again, I'm unsure of the accuracy. And also, whenever I personally remote view future events that are, the ones that are a bit more destructive, um, I've seen a tendency that my remote viewing sketches and data have a magnitude which is quite a big percentage higher than what actually happens. So if I get a big picture of a mushroom cloud kind of thing, then it tends not to be a nuclear explosion, but something like a volcano that's exploded that looks like a nuclear explosion. So, yeah, I would say the magnitude in my future bad stuff that happens looks hard on paper, but in reality, it's like about 30% lower than what I'm recording. It's almost like the recording process expands it or adds a bit too more to it than you really should.
Yeah, and at the same time, a lot of spiritual leaders and teachers talk about how we are on the precipice of a great awakening, and I mean maybe they could go hand in hand with each other,
Yeah,
some
I definitely think the awakening's coming. And I've talked about this quite a lot recently. I think my personal belief and intuition on this is that it's coming because of what we're doing with AI.
Mm,
I think AI is going to be the precursor of it, and that's also why I believe that we're having the disclosure UAP, non-human intelligence stuff be so strong and moving so solidly at the moment as well, because all that has the AI component as well. They're also aware that for the very first time in history, humans are going to be creating life that isn't from our genes,
mm,
and what the implications of that is, and how do we go good or do we go bad with it as being humans and being able to make choices. So I think it's all coming together all at once, and that's why we're seeing this huge interest in consciousness and and interaction. Yeah, but that's just my personal feeling, and seeing how AI works. I think we're on the cusp of something very new and potentially amazing.
hmm.
Here is a question from a viewer whose YouTube name is Dimi, Dimi, who asked as if you've ever had during remote viewing, have you ever felt yourself touch a reality that was so vast, so alive that it changed you, not just in belief, but in being? And if yes, what did it feel like?
Wow, that's such a big question. Yeah, several. I think the ones I talked about earlier when looking at the lottery and seeing where the source of all the remote viewing or psychic information came from, that all-knowing, sentient, super dark being that I can't describe. Yeah, that was one. But as I said, more recently the weird drone thing as well, following that across through a hole in time and space through these layers into another dimension, and then seeing what was at the end of it, and glimpsing this very weird hive-like vertical world. That's yeah, that was mind-bending as well. I mean, I can't prove the only problem is I can't prove any of this, but those experiences, those two, and the JFK, following JFK through his death process to the other side, I would see those three are have showed me that there's more to life than I really can comprehend.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Jimmy asks a follow-up question as well, which is there a spiritual growth when practicing for years remote viewing? Are remote viewers becoming more enlightened as spiritual beings because of remote viewing?
Wow, that's such a good question. Are they? I guess my take on this would be um, that would be an individual path. I wouldn't say that as I wouldn't say that as a community of remote viewers that I've seen every remote viewer take a or advance on a spiritual path. I have to be honest. Some are enveloped in ego and toxicity. It's the same with, but that's the same. That I would say that's the same with every community out there. There are some people that take a spiritual pathway and some that don't. But I think for the majority, if you keep an open mind, um, that you can, the more you experience, especially the more esoteric targets, the more your spiritual pathway can open up for you. Absolutely. It definitely has for me, and I think it has for the people that I mentor as well.
We have an audience member, Julie Tasker, who asks, have you ever remote viewed the Ark of the Covenant?
I was tasked against it once. I don't think I did very well on it though. If I remember correctly, the energy that I picked up from it didn't agree with me in that I felt that I felt it was a weapon that could be quite destructive. And I think that I think I didn't do as good as I could have done, and I do on most of my targets because something was, yeah, kind of warning me away from getting too close to it.
I
Yeah,
recall from the biblical descriptions, it was quite destructive.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's all I can say on it, really. I would like to be retasked against it at some point in the future, like most targets. That I didn't do very well. I didn't get a lot. As I said, I think there's some things out there that's we're probably not meant to know about,
Mm.
even as remote viewers.
Well, here's a change of pace. A viewer named Mike Alpha has a question about unconditional love, and he's referring to the work of Julia Mossbridge, who was recently interviewed on our channel by Deborah Katz. And Julia has taken the position that sending unconditional love assists in remote viewing accuracy. And Mike Alpha would like to know your opinion of that hypothesis.
Yeah, I've spoken to Julia about this myself. I don't know. I'd like to see because everything we try to do with remote viewing is based on repetition in a scientific kind of framework. I would like to see, uh, the experimentation on that. On non-sending love and then sending love to see the accuracy of data and stuff. I mean, I guess it's possible, but again, as I said earlier, I think the entire RV process is individualistic. in that that might be what works for Julia. I'm not sure if that works for everyone. I do know that, I don't know if you guys have noticed this or seen it as well, but the people that are doing all of the new work with the non-humans, the NHI contacts they're doing, where they're kind of manifesting and calling down the craft that they're now capturing on video, they are also projecting good intentions and love and light as well for those interactions. So there may possibly be something very strong in that. As I said, I don't know. I would have to see. I would have to see the science behind it. I know that I don't. It's not part. It's not part of me to do something like that. It's just not my personal, yeah, way of being to do that. But I can understand how it would definitely work for other people.
There was a question, I'm trying to see if I can locate it, about psionic assets.
Yeah.
And all the news reports coming out about the use of essentially remote viewers who are also sending, projecting images and calling down UFOs. I have people, in fact, one of whom has been a guest on this program, who thinks all of that talk is a disinformation operation, that none of it is actually real. I wonder if you have any opinion about it, Daz.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I have strong opinions on it. Maybe a bit hypocritical in that, as I said in my first book, and I don't really promote the book much because it's not remote viewing, but the surfing the psychic internet, that's the kind of things I did in the early 2000s, when we had these psychic circle channeled communications with non-human life forms. We didn't manifest craft, but we were having conversations with non-human life forms. So yes, that kind of stuff is possible. People have been reporting doing it for, maybe thousands of years, especially psychics and channelers and stuff. The way it's being used more recently, I'm a bit wary of though, but that's because, as I said, some of my interactions that I did in that channeled stuff, I did have encounters with some darker, shadowy type beings that didn't want us to progress as the human race to have these capabilities. So they were trying to stop me, and they were, and we've heard many reports of people that have shadow type beings in their bedrooms and all that kind of stuff. So that's a possibility out there as well. I would say to everyone, it's possible to do this. I absolutely believe it's possible to do this kind of stuff. But what I would also, and I do urge caution in people literally with no training whatsoever, just thinking, oh yeah, I'm just going to go out in my garden and start trying to manifest a non-human craft down to see what happens. Because we have to bear in mind, the interactions that I and other people have had that have been unsavory, and there is like scientific evidence as well. Like we know, we call it the hitchhiker effect, where people that have UAP and very strong paranormal effects, they take these effects home and then they transfer it to the people, family, and friends around them as well. And that's been very much reported in scientific literature now. They even have a virability effect, and so they know how viral this hitchhiker effect can be. So I would just urge caution in anyone that yes, this kind of stuff's possible and it could be absolutely amazing. You can have amazing experiences, transcendental for you and the life forms you're communicating with. But we all have to urge caution, be very cautious, educate yourself in this first before you take anything on. Read literature, read the books, think very seriously about what you may be doing because not everyone is in the right mental space as well to be able to cope with what they may be opening themselves up to. So just be very careful.
And do you think it's a good idea for a person to have a teacher in remote viewing? Or do you think some people can read literature, watch YouTube channels, and start doing it themselves?
You can do it yourselves, but it will be a slower process because you won't have anyone else to help you with some of the nuances. There are a lot of nuances with not just remote viewing, but all psychic development. All psychic development is good to have a mentor to help you along those pathways, and to do things like keep a diary as well of everything you're doing. Review the diary, review every remote viewing session, what went wrong, what went right. How could you improve, that kind of thing. Yeah, so I would say try in any kind of psychic pathway anyone's trying to go through, try to get a mentor or try to get, into a group situation where you can learn together. But you can do it on your own, but it will be a slower, harder process.
Yeah. Yeah, they can learn from the wisdom of the teacher and also find where there might be pitfalls and
Yeah,
like how you teach, which I really like how you are offering this and that you, which I think is probably good for every student, is for the teacher to modify to the students'
yeah,
learning
yeah.
abilities and how they best can absorb and receive the information.
Yeah, and like for example, and I'm not trying to sell my services, but the way I mentor, I take only 10 people on a year, and it's at least a 13-month process. So,
Mhm.
and over that process, they do over 125 remote viewing sessions, which are all marked by me individually as well. So it's a very long exposure so that they can adapt to, and I can see how they're adapting and see if they're ready for each part of the process as well. I think that's key. You can't just chuck people in at the deep end and expect them to
Yeah.
essentially possibly interact with any, all kinds of time and space in non-human beings out there with no experience and no safety net. You have to be very careful.
Yeah, and then the more that they have those experiences and get the feedback, their confidence can be built, or they can find where maybe
Yes.
they weren't quite accurate in what was happening there and continue to refine their process going forward.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah,
Building confidence. Yeah. Building confidence and trust. Again, trust in your own abilities. Yeah.
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 There's a question here from another audience member, and I just want to preface this response that we did an interview that goes more into depth with this the remote viewing UFOs and UAP on New Thinking Aloud that Daz and I did together. Margie Huron asks, what do you think of Bob Lazar's claims of S4 at Area 51? Did your team sense non-human intelligences there?
Yeah, I worked a target with. I've always been interested in the Bob Lazar story since the '90s when I first heard of it. Um, and it's never been given to me as a target. So I think about 18 months ago, as part of the future forecasting group, I set one of the days that Bob Lazar said he was working at S4 as a target to the team of viewers at Future Forecasting Group to see if he was in that location when he said he was doing the things he said he was doing. Um, and all remote viewers came back talking about an underground facility that was very heavily influenced by the military. We're looking at esoteric technologies and all kinds of very strange, yeah, all very strange stuff. I don't think they reported any non-human lives themselves, but I think the technology they were describing was very advanced and non-human. But yeah, I don't think I remember them detailing any non-human, yeah, beings being there. But they did get amazing data, which did seem, I'm afraid to say, to confirm Bob Lazar's story about, yeah, the S4 facility.
And wasn't there, I thought that in our conversation there was a being, maybe it wasn't S4, but I thought it was related to Area 51. No, I'm thinking, yeah, wasn't that what it was?
We might have been on one of the targets when I was sent to Area 51 to look
Yes,
around.
when you
Yeah.
were.
When
Hmm.
I was sent on a different target to look at Area 51, which is a slightly, a couple of miles away from S4, it's a bit more north.
Okay.
I did encounter in one of the levels a sentient being that was in, and this is weirdly before, 10 years before the drone stuff that we're seeing. I encountered a sentient being in a circular, spherical shaped, shiny object, and the actual object itself was an intelligent AI, but it was being contained in the facility, and it knew that the people that contained it didn't know that it was a super intelligent AI. It was almost like waiting for a chance to escape or something there. It was, yeah, just being contained.
You call it a super intelligent AI
Yes, something like that. Yes.
versus NHI? I just caught that.
Yes. Yes. That's very good. I don't. Yeah, there is a distinction. It was different, but I
Okay.
couldn't. I couldn't. Bearing in mind, I'm thinking back to what I recorded 15 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. And you do
Yeah,
some
and
sessions.
now I'm thinking about it. It actually felt different than yeah when I remote viewed the drone stuff 3 or 4 weeks ago as
Okay.
well. Yeah, that was
Mhm.
different. That was different again. That was more. Oh. more organic. Yeah, that was more organic, but it was also controlled by people. So it was being, like well, with a normal drone, you have someone somewhere with a control pad moving it out of sight. That's what the New Jersey drones were more like. Whereas the Area 51 one was more a living a living being, a sentient being. The
Hmm.
drone was alive and organic, but it didn't have that independent sentience about it that the Area 51 one did.
Hmm.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
We have a couple of related questions. Chris Fleming asks, how do you block remote viewing? And then there's a question from Nance Hardwick who asks, how do you know if the target is being blocked from viewing?
Yeah, they're very good questions. All I can do is refer to the science, the 110,000 pages that came out of Stargate. Um, they did so many tests and they could not block remote viewing in any way at all. I've never seen or I've never felt that a target has been blocked myself from me. Um, I did work a target for Courtney. I think it might have been the Area 51 one, where me and Dick, the two viewers that were at that target, the very first time we went against it, we just didn't report anything about Area 51. And Courtney Brown felt like we were being blocked from not seeing it, and he claims to have done some kind of manipulation to allow us to see through. I don't know. I don't know what to believe or make of any of that. All I can say is I've never encountered, never seen, or never known of any remote viewing that's been been blocked. Other than, as we said, we know that future targets are less accurate, so that's kind of block it in some way. We don't know how that manifests.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't think you can disguise or block. There are some indicators that the Russians, when they tried to stop the remote viewers in the past from seeing targets, that they used to do the entropy thing I talked about earlier. So they would used to have big colorful balloons in a room to take the viewer's attention, looking almost like, oh, what are these big colorful balloons doing over here? And while they're doing that, they're not looking at the filing cabinet with the information. So there might be some truth in techniques like that. I know Dr. Edwin May did some experiments where when they revealed targets, they actually set off a nitrogen bomb, which gave a big kinesthetic kind of um, event, like I was talking about with the energy, which seemed to have been a bigger, kind of target for the remote viewer to hone in on. There are things like that, so I think you might be able to disguise targets with entropic events, but I haven't seen enough research on any of that, to be honest. Or maybe even nuclear, put information that you don't want the remote viewer to see very close to the big things like nuclear weapons, because then the remote viewer will instantly go to nuclear weapons and look at them rather than the information.
Mm.
Yeah.
We have less than 10 minutes left. Daz, you're getting lots of great questions and wonderful answers. Greasy Slick asks, have you ever remote viewed heaven?
Uh, Not as such. Only, I would say the closest I got was the moment JFK died one, where I saw that someone was in an event where they were being killed, and I followed them through to the afterlife process. I don't know if I could class that as heaven or not because I don't know what my belief system is. But I would say that would be the closest. Other than, as I said, if I mix bits from different targets, like, if I mix a bit of that with I saw the afterlife stuff with a bit of the seeing Jesus on the cross and the great love from that, and then little bits of information I just experienced a few weeks ago when I saw the viewers' data of what happened when Jesus's imprint was made on the cloth. If I mix bits and pieces of those all together, it starts to build a bit of a picture that kind of leads to things like heaven. But again, I don't know. I can't give any definitives. I'm just giving you bits and pieces here. I do not know. I honestly do not know.
Yeah, and with JFK and the afterlife, what made you associate that with heaven?
Yeah, I'm
Possibly.
not sure I do. I mean, maybe just because it's the way people link these things together. I don't know what my belief system is or what I what I know or believe is real. And bear in mind, this is from someone. My first training was as a medium, so I thought at the time I was speaking to dead people that had passed over. But now, because I've spent 30 years as a remote viewer and I know that I can get pretty much the same information from remote viewing, that's made me question, was I talking to dead people at the time, or was I just in a slightly different way accessing this field of information that we all seem to be able to have access to? I have more questions than I have answers.
Yeah. Just curious, Daz, have you ever or any of your colleagues ever remote viewed a new being, human, creature before they were born or while they were in utero and had feedback once they were born?
That's a very good question. I don't think I've ever, no, I don't think I've ever seen a project that does that, but that would be a very interesting one to do.
Well, I mention it because Jeff has taught me this term called announcing dreams because it's happened to me a few times in my life with family members. And a few times it had happened, it to your point about talking about with mediumship, are you really communicating with a deceased loved one versus getting
Yeah.
entangled information, or where is it, quote, coming from? That I had dreams of these children before they were born, and I knew that the mother was pregnant before she had biological indications or around that time. And so it really showed me that, a lot of times we look at after death communication or when people have near death experiences and they get verifiable information, that gave me verifiable information
Yeah.
because I they looked exactly how they looked in my dreams.
Mm. I've never seen it as a project, but it would, yeah, that would make a very interesting scientific project to do. Yeah.
And I think
Um,
about Jeff winning the Bigelow competition essay and how you had the nine spectrums of arrows. And I was thinking that that could be a way of also verifying,
yeah,
circle of life. So, oh,
yeah. It would
Well,
make
Grace,
a
it,
great project. Absolutely. Yeah, but I haven't seen anyone do it yet. But I haven't seen everything that's out there. There may be something somewhere.
we have another question from that same viewer whose YouTube name is Greasy Slick, who asks if you can talk a little more about the missing person work, including how successful has it been? Have remote viewers successfully located missing persons?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And the answer is yes, but I think the percentage is quite low. I'd have to double check with Kelly. Kelly was my manager at the time. I worked primarily with a group called the Find Me Group for 5 years. They're still going, and if anyone's interested, they would be the people to contact. And essentially, they work as a go-between between missing people and law enforcement agencies, and it's run by Kelly Snyder, who is an ex-DEA agent, so he knows how to dialogue with law enforcement agencies. And all I can say is we worked many cases. I worked 250, but 180 of those, I would say, was one case working one serial killer case. So the rest, yeah, I could talk about that independently, but the other 70 plus were individuals. Um, and I think I vaguely remember he said the accuracy of them finding people was something like 3%. So it's not very high, but for those people, those families of loved ones, finding three out of every 100, if it was free, it might have been higher than that he said. But I was actually involved in one case where we found one individual, Sean, was his name. Um, my RV on that was 100 meters out, but the only reason I was 100 meters out was I was trying to pin a detail in a Google map of a river, and I just didn't know which way the river was flowing. So I picked the wrong flow of where it was going. So I was 100 meters out, but one of the remote viewers with their pin on that one, with a GPS coordinate, was dead on where they found the body. And we do have, I have I have a letter off of the police chief thanking us, and he says, they would not have found Sean without us giving them the directions. So
Mm,
yeah, it can happen. You can find people on occasion, but I think the figure for it is very low, and you should only do it working with groups, because when psychics, and I've done a lot of research on this, when psychics independently go to the police, they typically end up hindering investigations rather than helping, because on famous cases or media led cases, they get so many intuitives going to the police and they have to follow up every one of those leads, and typically the majority of the people aren't credible. It ends up causing them a lot more damage than it does help, I'm afraid.
mm.
Well, Daz, thank you so much for being with us for the last 90 minutes, even with a sore throat. I'm glad to see that your voice has held up for
Feeling
the
well, yeah.
entire program. It's been a great pleasure to be with you, and I expect that Emmy and I will both want to have you back many more times on New Thinking
Been
Aloud.
awesome. It's a great privilege. Great questions all around, and it's great meeting you both again as well. I always enjoy our chats.
Yeah, so nice to see you again. I'm glad your energy is doing well and you gave great responses. Just something to kind of slide in here at the end. Kathy Ledford is wondering how can we practice remote viewing? And I would say maybe learn, or do you have any suggestions? I know you talked about books. Do you just
Y-
suggest that people just get their hands on whatever interests them or?
Yeah, I always try to tell people, read first, before you try anything. It's easy to try remote viewing. You can literally pick up on my website or many others how to do it in a matter of minutes. But just think about it before you do it and read the literature, because there's so much out there you can learn from, and with the YouTube videos and stuff as well. But think, it is a commitment. To becoming good using remote viewing typically takes a good few years. It's a bit like learning a martial art. So bear in mind, if you really want to go the distance, you usually have to commit, which is why I say to people, please read first and make a decision on whether you want to commit, because sometimes there's a financial commitment to that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And also, there are many wonderful interviews on New Thinking Aloud, including yourself
Yeah,
and other fabulous remote viewers that
yeah,
people can watch.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you once again, Daz. Thank you, Emmy. And for all of our viewers and listeners, thank you, because you are the reason that we are here.
That's good.